And then I'm going to go 3 seconds in, because 30 frames is a second, so 30 is 1 second, 2 seconds, 90 is 3 seconds, and move the camera across the landscape. But I think what I want to do is actually, let me go back, at about 1.5 seconds in, so at 45, that's frame 45 there, I'm going to move the camera across the landscape and make another keyframe. And that will make the camera zoom in like that. After this keyframe, though, when it gets to be 90, halfway between here and 90, I want the camera to turn around, so I'm going to rotate in Z and spin the camera completely around, and at the same time back it up so that it's looking at Draper Lane and Mercy College. And I'll tilt this over, rotate it in the y-axis so that it changes its aspect like that. And then I will make a keyframe for that, location, rotation, scale. So now it zooms in, starts to swing around, and parks itself there. And then in the next second or two, I want to move the camera down and tilt it up a little bit so that we can see the Hebrew Center. Let me also rotate it in Z like that. Move it down a little bit more, move it in a little bit closer, and move it in Z a little bit more so I see Draper Lane and Mercy College. Let me make a keyframe there. Then we will let it zoom in on Greenberg in the next second or two. So let's rotate it in Z, RZ to rotate, and maybe tilt it up in X a little bit. Yep, and zoom it in. And let's see, a better way maybe to zoom it in would be, I don't know why that's in, okay. A better way to zoom this in would be, let's look at this from the materials. Oh, there's no light in this. What are we on? Solid. No light. Let's actually move the sun where it's supposed to be. The sun is coming from the south, and let's rotate the sun like that, because that's where the sun actually is in the south sky, and it is shining. That will give us proper shadows. That's what we want for shadows. All right, so now when we have the camera, we want to zoom in on Greenberg, go down, go forward, go, hit the G key and move it. That way we can see the solar panels and make a keyframe there. And then let's go a little bit further in our animation. Let's turn this, let's use the G key and let's see if we rotate the camera in the Z-axis and rotate it up a little bit, and then let's move it in so we can get a good look at the windmill. Oops, seems I almost lost that one. it's really hard to move things in the camera view screen. As you can see, it's a lot easier to move them with this and then do our RZ here. Sometimes things get really out of hand controlling a big camera. Okay, and bring this down and maybe bring it, let me make this the top view so I can bring this in a little bit more. There we go, that's better. And let's tilt this down in, not in X, but in RY, and move it. Oops. And rotate in Z. And I think we should also rotate in, what axis is that it's needs to be rotated in X, I think. Nah, actually, yes, rotate in X, but rotate like this in X, and then move the whole thing up a bit. Okay. So now we see the windmill, and we set a keyframe there. And the last part of our animation, we need to extend the end out a few more frames. Let's go to 300 frames, which would be a total of 10 seconds. And then we can go a few more, 300, 258, what's it doing? Okay. We can go out here and turn the camera, or back up the camera would be fine. Let's move it in, it's going below the line there. Let's back it up to Draper Lane and turn it to Draper Lane. If I can find Draper Lane here. It's turning the wrong way. Make it R and Z. Turn it onto Draper Lane that way. Bring the camera back. Bring the camera down. And move the camera forward. Maybe what I should do is literally turn it, lift the camera up, rotate it down like that, and bring the whole thing down to the solar panels. That's what I want to do. Whoops, whoa. And rotate it in Z. There we go. And make a final location rotation scale there and let it play out from there. So the way that the animation will play when we go to play it will be like, bring it back to the first frame, hit the play button, and so we will zoom in over Dobbs Ferry. We will turn. We can zoom in down to the Greenberg Hebrew Center and right on in, and then past that to Mercy College's turbine, and then to Draper Lane right over my apartment. Now the only problem I have with this right now is that out here it goes much too fast in between these keyframes, and what I want to do for that is go to the animation window and put in some space, some time between these keyframes. So I'm going to select these keyframes here and hit G and spread them out to give more time. And then let's also turn to the view here. This view needs to be the camera view, so I hit 0. It's in there, our material. And so we have it going to the Greenberg Hebrew Center. And actually that shouldn't be the one. We didn't want to make that so slow. It was this one here and this one here that we want to move out so that it lingers on the Greenberg. When it gets to the keyframe, well, let's do this. Let's copy the keyframe, Command Shift D to duplicate that keyframe and let it sit on that for a second. Then let it go and zoom in on the windmill and duplicate that and move Dobbs Ferry's Draper Lane over. And what that does is it lets it pause in those little areas. It'll pause on there, it'll pause on there, and then it'll come around and it'll pause on there, and that's the last frame, like that. Yep, that's it. And hit save. And then we can render this as a movie. And the way that we render this as a movie is we go to this camera, not this camera that we used before, but this camera here. And so there it goes, Greenberg Hebrew Center. It now pauses there. It then picks up the next keyframe. The only problem is this is longer than 300 frames, so I made a mistake here. I need to hit pause there. The total length of this now is 500 or so frames, and what we have here is 300, and there's 2 keyframes here and here now going up to about 420. So make the end of this 420 or 469, let's say 470. There. Now it will play through to the end. It zooms in, all the buildings are there, goes to the golf course, turns around, comes in on the Greenberg Hebrew Center looking down toward the river, zooms in on Greenberg past the Dobbs Ferry High School, and then stops, goes in, zooms in on Mercy's windmill, and comes back in. And that's the end of the animation and what we'd like to see. Now, here's something interesting. I just realized the high school actually in Dobbs Ferry has windmills in it with small solar panels, and we should be able to put them into the high school. So I'm going to go back to the default view and get out of the camera view. This is the Dobbs Ferry High School that I went to over here. And let me build the high school building so we can put in the actual windmills that exist there. That's where we used to play baseball. So once again, we go to the grease pencil, go to polygon. The gymnasium, we can put a little square too. And we can, oops, I hate when that happens. How does one, is it additive draw or continuous? Go to polygon again. Click on the rest of the high school. I guess that's technically the old middle school. And then that. And then do it again. And get the old high school here. The old high school building is here. And so with that high school building there, we then once again click off of it and you go to convert to geometry and do a path. Let it calculate, and then you can erase the lines so you can see the path that you've made. So there's the grease pencil erased. The paths are there. Then once you have this, and you hit escape to get out of that, then you take that and you go, this object now has to be converted to an object. That should have worked. That's an object now. And we go to edit, and you have all these points, and we want to get rid of the extraneous points, so I'm going to take out these vertices. I'm going to also take out all of these, and shift click to get rid of these vertices, and that one there. Delete that out. I'm going to, so all this cleanup that you have to do, get rid of these vertices. I'm going to grab this one and move it over. Yeah. Once again, go to Tools and remove doubles and see how much double removal works for you, and then hit enter. Now we have the ability to select all of it and put in faces, and now take those faces, bring it down onto the landscape for the high school, turn this around like this, and try to get some kind of height by doing E for extrude, and oh, something's weird here. It didn't do all the faces, did it? No, I guess it did. So it's a two-story building. You can get into architecture later on with Blender. So that's the extrusion, and then there's the building. So we'll make that a high school for now, just very blocky. And we will give it a color by going to materials and making the color of the high school orange. Oh, I didn't do that. Sorry. Make the color of the high school orange-ish. Orange-ish. Dark orange. Okay. There's that high school, there's the pitch, and the actual windmills and solar panels are here at Dobbs High School. So maybe they actually have the combo in 3D Warehouse that we want to use. So let's look at it. Let's see if we go back to 3D Warehouse and search for wind and solar. The actual one that's there is something like this, but it's not a helical one. It's a hold on a second. So when I do wind solar turbine, these are the options I'm given. If we actually look at the real one that's at Dobbs Ferry High School, you see the solar panel on a bracket there, and then the wind turbine is a normal horizontal turbine, and that doesn't seem to be in here. Eris Wind is the company. If I type in Eris Wind, nothing comes up. Yeah, so solar wind, that one has the panels way down low, and these others don't have solar panels associated with them. This one has a different type of turbine blade, so but this is actually looks more like what we want to use, and I guess we could go back and replace the turbine if we wanted to, but for right now we're just going to put it in. Again, it's collada file, and then show in the folder, and cut it, put it into our assets, paste it. By the way, this WinZip is such a pain with 1 day left in the free trial, I think I should counsel you all to get 7-zip, and I should have it as well. Download that for 32-bit for 64-bit Windows, and then it's worth having 7-zip. It's a much better program. Good. Now I've got 7-zip. All right, now that I've got 7-zip installed, if I right-click on this, I can reassign what opens these. I don't want WinZip anymore. Forget that. Choose another app and more apps, and always use this to open zip files. Look for other app on this PC. There's my 7-zip folder, and there is, I think that's the one, application, I'm not sure what M is, file manager, and this is 7-zip graphical user interface, and this is the actual application, I guess, or that's the console. I don't know. Let's see what happens if I pick this one and see. No, it doesn't do it. So let's try open with and choose another app and choose always use and look for another app on this PC. Let me just try the folder and see what that does. Oh, it still picks one of them. Maybe that. Let's see if that does it. Did it do it? Something's happening. Not doing it. 7-zip. Okay. Extract here. There we go. Boom. All right. So vertical wind turbine is there. It has a tower. Oh, that was the vertical. Oops, not that. Model. It says model, and there's a model DAE. Once again, then we're going to have to do that same thing. We're going to have to create a new folder. Call this the wind solar combo. Take the model and rename it to wind solar combo and bring that into the folder, and take the model which has the textures in it. So here wind solar has a texture for that panel. All right, now that we have that and we don't need it, we come back into Blender, go to a separate area and bring in this collada file. Tower, no, don't want tower, we want the wind solar combo, there it is. Import that collada, and now zoom in on it with period. There's the combo, and once again it's got all these different points, control points and stuff. So I'm going to try to bring everything in and try to combine it. So I'm going to hit Control J to combine that and wait to see if it combines all the parts. It's thinking, it's thinking, it's thinking. Let's try just the top. Control J. Oh, it became huge again. Okay, that happens. And fine, I'm going to make a copy of it. And I'm going to move that onto our primary layer. Go to our primary layer. There it is, looking massive on the landscape, way too big. Hit 7, now move it to the high school where they've got several of these. And yeah. And then also I want to check make sure I have a name for it. So wind turbine group. And I'm going to rename this to wind solar combo, Dobbs high. I'm going to shrink it way down with S. Bring it down onto the landscape. The actual location, there's several of them. They're all right up at the back of the parking lot here in the real place, in the real world in Dobbs Ferry, and they're a bit shorter, so let me bring it down a little more. They're about as tall as the building. So, yay for that. It might be a little bit taller than that. Let's make it like that. And again, we can use the array to make sure that they're nice and neat and not use, I have to spend the time duplicating. So we have it selected there. It's sitting in the landscape, and I can now take it and go to a modifier and go to array, and there it is, and I can make my offset just a bit bigger, and then I can do more than 2. I think they have 4, and I think they're spread out wider. So instead of using 5, let me go 4 and spread them out through the parking lot. And there you are. So while they're the wrong kind of windmill, they do have windmills, as I showed you in this picture here. It's just a different type of windmill, and there's the solar panel, which is cool. So our goal is usually to put in stuff we'd like to see, but sometimes we better put in stuff on the landscape that is real, that's actually happening. We don't want to shortchange the world. So Greenberg actually does have solar panels covering its roof, and Dobbs Ferry does have solar and wind in the parking lot right next door. Mercy does not yet have a wind tower, and Draper Lane doesn't have a wind tower. Now what happens when we hit play, let's save this, is our animation, if I go to our view there, and we go to the beginning, now the windmills are in the model. So we just fly around, and then we go into and pause for a moment at the Greenberg Nature Center and Dobbs Ferry High School, and you can see the windmills. Now the one thing is that now you don't really see all the windmills in that pause, so let's change that keyframe just a bit. Let's go to the keyframe, and the keyframe doesn't show up here because keyframes are in the model area. So I think if we go like this, we'll see the camera is where the keyframes would be. So we need to go view camera. Where's camera? Search. Camera should be here somewhere. There's so many different things in your file now that it becomes a pain, and you should really put that 01 in front of everything. There's camera. So I'm going to rename this and call it 01 camera and make it the 4 fly through, because that's what that camera that we're using is. That's the camera, the fly-through camera that we're using. Now there's all our keyframes, and you know that over here it stops at the Greenberg Nature Center. Not here, I guess it was at this frame here. And what the camera saw was that, and we want to change that. So one way that you can do it is to go to the next keyframe, jump to previous or next keyframe. So that's the keyframe there. The previous keyframe was that one. This here jumps to that keyframe, and we can change that keyframe by using the G key. Now that that keyframe is there, we can set it, location, rotation, scale, and replace that keyframe. So when it stops on that keyframe, all of the windmills are included. That next keyframe we don't need. And again, if you want to work with keyframes individually, you go to animation and you see this keyframe. Let's see what the camera sees. That keyframe is the one we like. This one here is the one we had. Let's just delete it. We don't need those keyframes. Let's move these with G out there to make it look okay. So we've got that keyframe there, and then we've got the keyframe there, and that keyframe there. Okay. Now we save it. Now it's about rendering. How do you render the movie? And the way that you render the movie is you go to this camera here, and you pick a temp file for the output. Once again, I'm going to render in PCGS, and I'm going to make this render, make a new folder, and call it rendered movies, and that's where I'll do my rendering. So that's the output there. Overwrite. I don't want it as a series of photographs right now. I want to do a simple, easy thing. So I'm going to do an FFmpeg video. And in the encoding, I'm going to do it as a H.264 in MPEG-4. And there is no audio associated with this. And then I'm going to, it'll render out to there. Okay, that's fine. I then click on animation and it starts to build its file. Although something is very funky now. We're getting all the houses, but we're not getting the information. So let me hit escape. I wonder why that is. What is it that has gone wrong here? Hit escape here. If we look at rendered mode, it should render. That's weird because what this is supposed to be doing, like if I go here to any keyframe and I hit render and I just render the picture, I should see everything, but I don't. Alright, so I was having problems rendering, even though when I looked at the rendered, I saw the rendered version. When I actually went to do the rendering and I would hit F12, I would just see the houses. And I didn't know why that was. And then I realized it's because my digital elevation map here had the rendering thing by default off. So if I turn this camera on, and now I hit F12, now I can render any of the aspects here. And so now I can do the animation by going to that camera that I showed, make sure that it's going to the right folder and that you've set everything correctly, and then you hit animation and it starts rendering, and it'll hopefully do the whole movie, and we'll render that out. And while we're letting that render out, we can play a different game, which is this fun Roblox. Let's see if cheese pizza. So ultimately we want to make a game somewhat like this, but where we're in our own town rather than in somebody else's town. That's the idea behind what we're doing here. And our next step after this renders out is we're going to bring all this into Unity and make that into a game where we can walk around our town the same way that they're doing in here. Okay.